Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, last night was the fourth GOP debate. We covered it live here with commentary on the nightly news last night. Later in the show, we'll have some highlights from that debate. NPR looked at what they talked about. And as we looked at the debate last night, I thought it was very dry with a few exceptions. We're going to talk about those exceptional parts. And it was very repetitious, talking a lot about tax policy. Everybody telling us what the rates were going to be, what the brackets were going to be in their fantasy tax world that they're planning on creating. Here are the issues, according to NPR, according to Time. They talked about taxes, deficit, the budget, the debt, about 26 minutes. They spent 18 minutes on foreign policy, pushing war, and we're going to talk about what they said on this Veterans Day. They also talked for 14 minutes about bank bailouts, and then they talked about just under 10 minutes on politics and bios in terms of Clinton and Carson, what was revealed about that. I think it was interesting before we get into the main content of the big debate that had the 8 candidates. They had a JV debate. They had moved Chris Christie down to that, and I thought he had a very interesting, very revealing comment about where he is and where this country is in the JV debate. Now, touching on Veterans Day, he had this to say. Chris Christie said, when Hillary Clinton says there's not a scandal at the VA, it sends a hard message to veterans that she doesn't get it and she doesn't respect their service. Then he continued and said, and when the President of the United States doesn't back up law enforcement officers in uniform, he loses the moral authority to lead any man or woman who wears the uniform. Do you understand that? Now, I agree with what he says about the VA scandal. Certainly, the way the vets are treated is scandalous, and we're going to talk about that in the next segment. But when he talks about law enforcement as being the military, understand that's the way he was doing. He juxtaposed those two things together, and he talked about law enforcement as being all under the president. No, it's the military that's under the president. And we need to understand that because we have tolerated a standing military in violation of the intent and the letter of the Constitution, now these people like Chris Christie view law enforcement as a standing military under the command of the president. And that's the reality, isn't it? Nobody else seems to have noticed this or cared, but it concerns me a great deal when he talks about the president being the leader of law enforcement. We need to understand this is what they want. They want federalized control of law enforcement. They want law enforcement to be militarized. And all of these shootings, all this violence that is new to law enforcement in the last few years is being pushed by a federalization, a militarization of the police. And of course, people like Chris Christie are just fine with it. Now, many people believe, libertarians, conservatives, even liberals believe that Rand Paul won the debate last night. When you look at the online polls, Trump will finish at the top of virtually every poll, but of course he is very high in the general polls. People will support someone that they will say they won the debate if they support them. But Rand Paul, who's polling at about 3%, finishes very high in most of the polls. Of course, the Wall Street Journal went to look at an online poll run by Google to show that Rubio did really well. They wanted to push that. But even in the online polls like the Drudge Report, which is huge, Rand Paul came in a very strong third. Now, if we look at this article from The Week, they pointed out that it was Rand Paul who made the most persuasive case that he could win over voters who aren't committed conservative Republicans. They say he spent the first half of the debate trying to get voters to care about the Federal Reserve, about interest rates, but he started to make his mark when he jumped in to accuse Rubio of being insufficiently conservative. He started out with the questionable popular assertion that families shouldn't get tax credits to pay for child care, but turned that into a more winning argument that the U.S. spends too much on the military, more than 10 times all the countries below that on the list. And understand that those countries are countries like Russia and China and Germany and the UK and all these different countries. If you total up what they spend on defense spending, that is combined less than what we spend on defense spending. But of course, Rubio says that we have to rebuild the military. Rebuild it from what? It isn't collapsing. And then they go on to say, though, that his big moment was on foreign policy. Republicans are fond of arguing that Obama is weak on national defense. He's created a mess in the Middle East. But Paul said his GOP colleagues are as hawkish as Hillary Clinton, or vice versa. That's not a new argument for Paul, but he followed it up with the potential consequences of a proposed no-fly zone that was popular on the debate stage. He said, Russia flies in that zone at the invitation of Iraq. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but you better know what you're getting into at least. So when you think it's going to be a good idea to have a no-fly zone over Iraq, realize that that means we are going to shoot down Russian planes. But as Rand Paul pointed out the folly of directly militarily confronting the Russians and shooting down their planes, the rest of the GOP, literally all the rest of the candidates on stage, as well as most of the audiences, reacted like this.
Can't you stick to the point, General?
Well, sir, if the pilot's good, see, I mean, if he's really sharp, he can barrel that baby in so low. I mean, you ought to see it sometime. It's a sight. A big plane like a 52. Vroom! It's jet exhaust frying chickens in the barnyard.
Yeah, but has he got a chance?
Has he got a chance? Hell, he's...
Yeah, I guess I would call that debate last night the GOP Strangelove debate, or how I learned to stop worrying and love bombing Syria and confronting Russia. Look at what the presidential candidates say about the no-fly zone in Syria. The New York Times broke this down with some interesting graphics. Look at this top graphic here. You can see all the candidates who support a no-fly zone. And if you can't read all those faces, it's an overwhelming majority. And it is everybody in the Republican Party except for Rand Paul. The only candidates running from both parties combined that oppose it are O'Malley, Paul, and Sanders. It is absolutely insane what these guys are proposing. And Rand Paul is absolutely right that in order to enforce this, you are going to have to shoot down Russian planes who have been invited into Syria. That's what they are telling us. It is absolute insanity. But of course, Marco Rubio and the rest of them will do whatever it takes to pander to the military-industrial complex. And that's what we need to remember on this Veterans Day. We need to understand how we get into one war after the other. Are 7 wars not enough? Evidently not for the GOP candidates. That's the number of wars that Obama's gotten us into without having a declaration of war, ignoring the Constitution, ignoring the wishes of the American people. It impoverishes us as a country economically, but it also impoverishes us with the loss of life. The people who die fighting these wars, and we don't stop it. We let them continue on with us.
Dr. Group joins us for the balance of this hour to talk about solutions. We have them up every couple of weeks. We have been trying to launch this for the last year. We got all of the organic ingredients to do it. And we've come out with a new Living Defense Harmful Organism Cleansing dietary supplement, and it is extremely affordable. It is brimming with the capsules. And the way I read the facts, this could do a cleanse for really a family of 4 or 5 people. Dr. Group, let's just get into the product now and then into parasites themselves, what folks really want to hear about in the next segment. But thank you for developing this for InfoWarsLife.com. Tell us about Living Defense and why it's so special.
Well, it's really special because it's part of the problem that we're dealing with today. When the earth becomes sick and the earth soils become acidic and the internal bodies become acidic because of all the toxic food in the air and the beverages that people are consuming, it sets up an environment that's ripe for harmful organisms to live, either on the earth. That's why a lot of the plants are infested with harmful organisms, or inside the body. And years ago, we linked every single disease process to an overgrowth of organisms in the body. And when people hear the word parasite, which the FDA does not like us to use, they actually came down on us and made us take the word parasite off everywhere, because we were exposing what the globalists have been doing, spreading these parasites and creating this environment, which is great for them to live in for years and years and years, because they know they drain us of energy, they make us sick. So we had to actually change the word parasite to harmful organism. And when we talk about harmful organisms, it's the definition, actually, the medical definition of parasite is any harmful organism that lives off of a host mechanism. Most people just think parasites are worms, but harmful organisms are bacteria, viruses that you can get through flu shots, funguses, yeast. We literally have an epidemic going on right now with molds and fungus and yeast living in everybody's body.
This is something that I heard about over a decade ago. I didn't really believe. I did one of these cleanses or invasive organism or harmful organism cleanses. It really hurt a lot, but it did do a lot. With this was not painful like some other cleanses I've done. The product is available at InfowarsLife.com. I've always read and heard that just one of the ingredients, black walnuts, is really good at flushing parasites, and that, animals out in the fields eat them and stuff to naturally do this. We do cleanses on our dogs, our cats, our horses, our cows. Why not us?
Well, because they don't want you to know about that you need to do a parasite or a harmful organism cleanse. That's the thing. It's so secretive. And when we were doing our research into the root cause of every single disease, there's been plenty of proof.
The statistics are clear. 9 out of 10 people are infested with harmful organisms like parasites. Parasites can be transmitted by people, pets, food, and the environment, and so many other sources. Once parasites have made it inside your body, they steal your nutrients and release toxic waste. They use the bathroom inside of you. It's time to start eliminating toxic and harmful organisms from your body. Introducing Living Defense, the new harmful organism cleanser by InfowarsLife.com. Living Defense uses wild-crafted organic herbs to help naturally cleanse harmful organisms from the body. We are expected to sell out of this very, very quickly. This is our limited first-time run. So visit InfowarsLife.com today to try Living Defense today while supplies last.